the commercial's over. Just like football games. Call to order the October Finance Committee. Welcome everybody here tonight. We have a very full agenda, so we will get going right away. The first thing we do is take the consent. Are there any consent items?
C5.
C5,
C9.
C9. I'm looking around. Can I get a motion to approve the balance?
Move for approval of the balance of the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second to approve the balance. If the four committee members will vote when it comes up. Those are approved. Thank you all very much. We will go in numerical order. C5, if the city clerk will please read that one.
Item C5, consideration of items relating to the permanent financing for a 60-unit family rental development known as Pegram Landing 2.
Ms. Newman, I think this was Ms. Scipio. Ms. Scipio, do you have any specific questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members and fellow council members. I had several questions on this one, and one is that this is coming to us as a consent agenda item, as an action item, and not as information first. And I wanted to know the rationale for that. And this is a project that's in Louisville, not in the city, and what allows us to give funding for this kind of development. And I wanted to know more about the developer, their background, and how did they come to us for this?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Chair Clark, Vice Chair, members of the committee, members of the council, Mayor. Marlon Newman, Community Development Director. So Pegram Landing, this particular project that's in front of you, is the second installment of a development that is already in Louisville. This particular project was awarded low-income housing tax credits in 2020, and had everything in the market gone according to plan, they would have started construction rather in the spring of last year, and by this point would have probably been leased up. With the change in the market, the skyrocketing prices, they found themselves with a gap, and so that's the first part, is how it is that they have come to us. Winston-Salem is in a consortium or a partnership with Forsyth County as it relates to home funding. And so we are the participating jurisdiction through whom home funds, the federal funds, come through on behalf of not only us as the city, but on behalf of the county as well. And so any funding that goes into the county flows through us. So that is how we are able to support projects outside of the physical city limits of Winston-Salem. And then as far as the background on the developer, again, like I said, this is the second phase of Pegram Landing. This particular organization was founded in 2017. Charlie Heritage, who is the principal of the organization, has 15 years of experience in multifamily housing development. He is to be here today. Yeah, there he is, okay, and certainly can speak to some additional parts about his background and his experience, if you'd like for me to call him to the podium.
Thank you very much.
Answer your questions? Okay. Can I get a committee member to move this?
Move for approval of item C5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve C5. If the committee will please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you. We'll now go to C9. If the city clerk will please read this one.
Item C9, resolution awarding purchase orders for police pursuit vehicles.
Mr. Larson, I think this was you.
Yeah, I just have one basic question for
Go ahead.
this. Is the 45 cars we're getting ready to purchase for the police department. I'm all for bringing modern technology up to our police department. I am curious if any of these vehicles are hybrids or electric vehicles to reduce our carbon footprint of the city.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, other members of the committee and council. These vehicles are not hybrid. There are not any hybrid vehicles included in this particular assortment of vehicles.
I'm anxious for this city to begin to transfer its fleet over to hybrid or all-electric fleet. It's the future of the industry, and it's our commitment to reduce our carbon footprint. If we continue to buy, 20th century vehicles in the 21st century, we're never going to meet that goal. So I'd appreciate it if staff, when looking at purchasing in the fleet, I'm going to ask this question every time I see a vehicle now, as to when we're going to start seeing us making a transfer over to the 21st century.
Yes, sir. We are exploring hybrid vehicles, and we are pursuing alternative fuel options for our vehicles. We're adding more propane type vehicles this year to help us meet those goals. But we will look at the hybrid further and be moving toward changing our fleet over.
I suspect the cost is more, and I appreciate your sustainability falls under your wheelhouse, Mr.
Yes,
Taylor,
sir.
and I appreciate the work you're doing with sustainability, but this is something that is obvious to me. It's an area that we need to begin seriously thinking about. Thank you.
Mr. McIntosh?
Just to note that these vehicles do have a significantly better mile per gallon rating than the vehicles they're replacing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Adams?
And Mr. Taylor, if you can kind of help the council understand, we might, if we could change over tomorrow, we do it, but where are they going to get plugged up to? That's part of the whole deal that's going on across the country. People want electric vehicles and hybrids, but unfortunately, the infrastructure is not there yet, and the car manufacturers, they know that. So they're trying to get us there, but I know the sustainability in your department, you'll bring us back a report as to if we, give us some idea if we were to switch to 20 or 30, how many charging stations would be needed and where throughout the city, Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
I move for approval of item C9.
Second.
We have a motion second on C9. If the the committee, please vote when it comes up. That is approved. That's the only consent items I had. I don't think I missed any. We will now go to the general agenda. Before I start, I do want to make a comment. We will not, I repeat, we will not having a public comment period tonight. And I do know that a number of y'all are here for I think it's G5, the one on the ARPA money. Next Monday night, a week from tonight, at the City Council, there is a planned public comment period. There is always at the second meeting of the month. The mayor is aware of that, just spoke to him about it, and we'll take comments at that point. Also, Mr. Tesh, will you raise your hand? Mr. Tesh is in charge of the ARPA program, so if anybody has any specific questions or comments, he is available as well. Thank y'all. With that, we will start with G1. If the city clerk will please read G1.
Item G.
Mr. Chair,
Oh.
but you may have to let the audience know that we're still going to have the item on the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
will have some discussion, just.
We'll have some discussion, but no general comment period. Okay, G1.
Item G1, consideration of items related to a Department of Homeland Security staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grant.
Chief Mayo, could you give us a 2-minute on this one?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee and council.
Good afternoon.
This is an item that came before Public Safety in February. It's $2.8 million the feds are going to pay for 15 firefighters over 3 years. That's salary and benefits. There's no local match for salary and benefits. The city's costs will be associated with providing turnout gear, uniforms, that sort of thing. But with our staffing as it is, we would have spent that money anyway. This is a staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grant from the Department of Homeland Security, and with the intent being to assist fire departments meeting the travel time standard established by the National Fire Protection Association, which is 8 minutes traveling at the 90th percentile, and we're doing that about 50% of the time.
Okay, and you said this did go to public safety last month?
In February.
In February.
Yes, sir. The application window is so short for these grants, we rarely can follow the procedure exactly like we should and get before you and council and get the grants submitted. Normally, you only get about 3 or 4 weeks to do it.
Okay. Question. Any questions or comments, Ms.
Yeah.
Ms. Adams?
Chief, just like we've learned over the years when we receive these grants or accept them, and particularly since it's no match, this is great, $2.8 million, and it's a 3-year, and it's 15 officers. Then we decide whether we're going to keep the officers, but at the rate we're going right now, I would bet money we may be able to keep those 15 because 15 plus are going to be moving on to retirement or whatever. So this kind of puts us, to me, in a good spot.
Yes, ma'am. Again, this is money that we would have spent anyway. So to get the Department of Homeland Security to pay these salaries and benefits, I think it's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I move for approval of item G1.
Thank you. Have a second?
Second.
Have a
Thank you.
Motion second. Please note the motion was made by the chair of the Public Safety Committee. If the committee will please vote when it comes up. For you folks out there in person and in TV, if you wonder why only 4 of us are voting, there are only 4 committee members up here. All city council members are invited to all committee meetings, and we happen to have a full house tonight. I take comments from everybody, but only the 4 committee members will vote. But at the council meeting where all this is being forwarded to, everyone will vote on this next Monday night. So anyway. Okay, that is approved. We'll now go to G2.
Item G2, resolution approving economic development assistance to Project Bluefin pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 158-7.1. Public hearing will be November 1st, 2022.
Okay. Ms. Millett, you're going to present this. I would note to everybody, we're using a name, Bluefin, which is not the name of the company. We cannot disclose who the company is at this point. But council was briefed in private, and the company was disclosed to us at that point. So, Mr. Millett, if you will present this, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Clark. Good afternoon, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the committee, members of full council. This item does concern an economic development project that is codenamed Project Bluefin. The company is a manufacturer of motors used in industrial and institutional industrial and institutional ventilation systems for a wide range of applications, including food storage, cold storage, hospitals, schools, government buildings, data centers, and agricultural systems. Project Bluefin is looking to expand North American production to reduce the reliance on its company headquarters in Germany. The proposed facility would serve as both the North American headquarters, the primary distribution facility, and the primary production facility for the company. Winston-Salem is one of several locations being considered, including other sites in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. The company's taxable investment over 5 years is expected to be $50.5 million. The project involves approximately 200 current employees, as well as the creation of approximately 300 new jobs within 5 years at an average wage of approximately $60,000. A representative sample of job types includes laborers, approximately 150 positions, machinists, approximately 28, logistics, approximately 16, engineers, approximately 17, finance, HR, and IT, or IT, approximately 15, purchasing, approximately 14, and various other positions. The company's existing workforce is 32.5% female and 67.5% male. 39.3% are minority, including 26.2% African American. The company has requested financial incentives to reduce the capital outlay associated with the project. The attached resolution authorizes the city to provide up to $632,947 in performance-based economic development assistance. This amount is 50% of the estimated net new property taxes generated by the project over its first 7 years. This incentive level translates to $2,110 per job based on 300 new positions. If the existing 200 jobs are included, it's $1,266 per job. North Carolina General Statute 158-7.1 authorizes cities to make appropriations for economic development purposes. The project is consistent with the city's public policy justification to stimulate the local economy through the creation of new jobs and investment. Incentives are also being considered by Forsyth County and the state of North Carolina. If approved by Finance Committee, a public hearing will be held at the November 1st City Council meeting. I will note that the city's incentive included in this resolution is 7 years. Our typical period for incentives is 5 years. Due to the nature of this project, the 7 years is being advocated by Greater Winston-Salem, and Laura Lee with Greater Winston is here to address that.
Ms. Lee, you come on up. If you give your name and address for the record, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Clark. Laura Lee, and the address is 411 West 4th Street, Winston-Salem, 27101.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. We're pleased that Project Bluefin is in front of Finance Committee today. As Ken noted, the Greater Winston-Salem Inc. is advocating for a 7-year incentive for Project Bluefin because the project will be a North American headquarters for the company with the potential, so we're looking at 300 jobs now, but their anticipation is to hire and have 800 positions over a 10-year time horizon, which is just really exciting to have that sort of employer in that part of our community. As always, we are up against fierce competition for this project, both within the state of North Carolina and outside of North Carolina. And in conversations with the company representatives, we've really learned more about their commitment to the triad market and also their commitment to our workforce. So the positions, as Ken noted, 150 of the ones they're looking at incentives for are laborers and other various positions as well. They exceed our current average wage and pay wages that would provide dignity and the opportunity for upward mobility for our citizens. So we do have a member of the company's management team who is here in support of the project as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mayor?
I have any questions. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir. You may comment.
I think this is one of those rare projects that come along with great job generation, amazing tax base generation, where we're going to, the city from the get-go will be netting 50% of the net new taxes coming in. And should point out to the public that we're not taking money from our budget to pay this incentives. The company will pay us, and then we'll pay them back with that. It's a for performance program that we have. The other thing I wanted to make sure was clear is that company approached us. We didn't go to Greensboro, shopping Winston-Salem. And I did have a conversation today with Mayor Vaughn just to apprise her of it and let her know the situation. She certainly understands that. She's glad that we can perhaps keep it in the triad. And so she's very much in favor of that. So the return on investment is there. It's clear. The city is ahead from the get-go with a new tax base, new generation of taxes for us. And the creation of good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs is a key part of our strategy here. And so I think it fits very well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Millett and Chamber, thank you for your comments. Mr. Millett, again, and I know you'll have this before Monday, when businesses put out the broad title of what the jobs are, the council needs to know what are the specifics. I mean, a laborer can be somebody pushing a wheelbarrow or somebody working on a machine line. My 38 and a half years of career was done in manufacturing, so I know there's a job description for every job heading. So I would like those job descriptions as well as what is the requirements. Is it a high school diploma? Is there going to be some training provided by Forsyth Tech or on the job? Or those positions that require college degrees and master's degrees in engineering and electronics? I think we owe it to the community I love the poke, as they say, the bag, the poke, whatever you want to call it. But I need to know what's in it.
Yes,
I need to
ma'am.
know what's in it. I support it wholeheartedly, but I need to know what these jobs are, again, because I've been in manufacturing.
Yes, ma'am. We'll be sure that that is provided prior to the public hearing.
And manufacturing does pay money. Good manufacturing, I've told the council, the mayor, Chairman Clark, Councilmember Taylor, and McIntosh, when manufacturing is not being done, you can't create new products. You can't keep up with what people expect to see every day in their life, because everything that we have, do, use is created in manufacturing. So I look forward to seeing more manufacturing coming back to Winston.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Millett, Ms. Lee, just want to thank you for your leadership on this greater Winston-Salem. Very excited to be bringing 500 jobs particularly to the Southeast Ward, but it will ultimately benefit the entire city at large. I think this is a good opportunity for our community. Not only will we be creating jobs, and hopefully folks will come in and work in our community, but we hope that they live in our community. We hope that they relax in our community, and overall, it's for the greater good of Winston-Salem. A couple of things. Number one, the deal pays for itself. Number two, we do have clawbacks in place. Mr. Millett, as always, particularly when we bring jobs to the city, we want to make sure that we're working with Forsyth Tech and the universities to make this thing happen. But we want to make sure that the jobs get to the people that need to get them. So let's talk a little bit about the hiring process. We always typically do a job fair. Hopefully that's something that we can work with management to do, just to make sure we're hiring as many people as we can locally. Your thoughts?
Councilmember Taylor, we have spoken with the company about some of their efforts for recruiting for those new positions. They are excited to be holding a job fair. Obviously, the details will be worked out. But they have agreed to have a job fair where they will advertise the job openings, includes organizations that are a broad representation of the community. They have been very willing to not just have conversations, but agree to their outreach efforts to ensure the broader population as a whole is included.
Thank you, Mr. Millen. We're looking forward to working with the company to help to get this done.
Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, I think I speak for everybody up on the dais to say that we all wish that we didn't have to provide incentives, but in the competitive economic climate that we're in, we do. And if during the first 7 years of this, if we win this deal, the city will bring in $632,947 in taxes. Over the first 14 years, if they stay on another 14 years, it's almost $2 million. So the benefit to the city is significant, not even counting sales tax increase and things like that. My question for Ms. Lee is that, is this manufacturer similar to the automotive business where they bring suppliers along with them? Will we see any external growth sort of around them?
That's a great question. Thank you, Councilmember McIntosh. They have noted that they have the potential to grow to over 800 jobs, and I do think there may be some ancillary services that would need to be connected with those, but haven't had lengthy discussions yet about what types of suppliers might be associated. But we'll make those conversations happen now.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Scipio.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know we all are anxiously awaiting the answer, and we hope we will be the choice. My question is, what is their timetable? If we're chosen, when do we see construction and then production?
Thank you, Ms. Scipio. It's a really quick timeline. They're hoping to break ground by the end of this year, and then be in operation by December 2023.
December 2023, in a year.
Which is about as aggressive a timeline as you can have.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion from the committee member?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second on G2. If the committee will please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you very much. We'll now go to G3. If the city clerk will please read G3.
Item G3, resolution authorizing award of a contract to Frank L. Bloom, WC Constructive Company, a joint venture to provide construction manager at risk services for the Truist Stadium upgrade.
Mr. Rowell, will you please present this maybe with a little emphasis on what construction at, whatever the terminology is, and then what's the next step after we do the engineering?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Jones, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the City Council. Back in 2020, Major League Baseball took over leadership of all levels of professional baseball, and at the time, their vision was to make improvements to all baseball stadiums, including those in the minor leagues, to elevate and standardize player facilities. As part of that, they put into place new facility standards that those who survived contraction would have to meet in order to continue to have what's called a professional development license. An evaluation was done of Truist Stadium. We received a score from the consultant that performed the assessment, and they noted a number of areas where we needed to bring those facilities up to standard, including both the home and the visiting team clubhouses, other facilities for officials, for the managers, also enclosing the batting facilities, and also some on-field improvements. Knowing that this project would have to be completed while we're probably in season, city staff recommended that we employ the construction manager at risk method to construct these upgrades, which is the same method that we used with the Bowman Gray Stadium improvements. With the construction manager at risk method, what we do is we bring on board an architect, and then very soon after that, bring on board the contractor to work together early in the design process as they work through various issues so that we can reach a point where what's called a guaranteed maximum price is negotiated with the owner to actually construct the improvements. So in a traditional design bid build, you hire the architect, they design it, and then you go out and you bid the work. And sometimes we've experienced situations where the cost from the bid exceeds our budget, and we've had to make some value engineering decisions, possibly, maybe even some scope changes. With this method, all those choices are made during the design process. So back in August, the city issued a request for qualifications for construction manager at risk services for this project. We received proposals from two companies, Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction Company, which is a joint venture, and then Samet Corporation. A panel of city staff scored both proposals on criteria of minority women business participation, the location of the business, the actual proposal, the proposed approach to the project, past performance with similar projects, and work experience. And based on the scoring from the panel, city staff recommends awarding a construction manager at risk contract to Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction, the joint venture. As I noted, as part of that NWB participation was a heavily weighted criteria. Frank L. Bloom, with its joint venture, already is proposing a 35% NWB participation for the project. The initial goal was 10%. I will say that with the construction manager at risk method, as we get into the design and eventually as the contractor starts to develop the bid packages, then there will be new goals established, and oftentimes the experience has been that those are also very high as well, and we anticipate a similar experience. So the item before you this evening is a resolution awarding a contract for construction manager at risk services to Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction. At this point, for the pre-construction contract amount of $30,000, which represents 0.5% of a potential GMP. Back in June, you awarded the contract for design services to Walter Robbs, Callahan, and Pierce. And so in terms of next steps, if the council does approve the award of the contract to Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction, and once those contracts are executed, then the architect and the contractor will get together very soon to start those discussions in the early stages of design. We'll be working, not only with the city team, but also with the Winston-Salem Dash team, as we work through the scope and work through the cost elements. This will also encompass the construction of the administration offices that the team did request. You all did approve a separate agreement with them to do that back in August, and so that will be part of the scope as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mundy.
Thank you, Mr. Rowell. Question on the scoring. Is Frank L. Bloom not located in Winston-Salem?
So that's a good question, Councilmember Mundy. So let me explain a little bit about how that particular criterion is scored. As part of the RFQ proposal, proposers are supposed to submit documentation that verifies that they are located in either the Winston-Salem or in somewhere else in North Carolina to be able to get at least points for being located in North Carolina. Our proposal document specifically shows the type of document that is required, which basically is a payroll tax report that shows that they've at least paid payroll taxes on at least one employee who works in the city. Frank L. Bloom did not provide that documentation, and so following our policy, they did not receive points. Samet did not receive points as well because they didn't present documentation as well that they are based out of Greensboro.
Thank you for that explanation.
Would you mind following up with them and just get an answer for that?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
I think they just announced that they're purchasing a building over off of Coliseum Drive. So, I mean, I don't think that's a real concern, but it would be good to sort of follow up on that. I know that Bloom was an early proponent of the design build manager at risk concept, and they seem to have really done well with us, both at Bowman Gray Stadium and with Marshall Park. Things seem to be, operating quite well. So I'm very happy to see them as the preferred vendor on this.
Ms. Scipio.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rao, WC Construction Company is in MWBE.
Yes, ma'am.
Where does it fall? Minority? Women? What?
Well, I believe it's a minority-owned company.
Meaning it's female or African-American?
I'm sorry, African-American.
Okay, thank you very much. And that weighted very strongly in the evaluation.
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, I agree with Councilmember McIntosh. We have had quite a relationship with Frank L. Bloom over decades, and they are not just people that are in the community, they live in the community, and they provide a lot of philanthropic work to the community and with their gifts as well. They don't talk about it, they about it. I also commend the fact that over the years, Frank L. Bloom has made more of an intentional effort to ensure that minority and women contractors have a platform and a vehicle to get other work for their companies by teaming and collaborating with them. Because you see, everybody won't do that. But I commend them for their efforts over the years that I've been on this council. And again, they've done a lot of things in the community so far as upgrades and repair, reconstruction. They do good work, and they stand by their work. So thank you very much for this. In the stadium, everybody would think when they drive by, it looks great, but that's brick. There are other pieces to the infrastructure that over time, whether weather, people, whatever, we have to take our compliance up. One of those is the fact that with diversity, equity, inclusion, we didn't have separate locker rooms and restrooms for women and others. And now we need to do that. So I commend the city and the staff for working with the stadium and the contractors and the Major League to get this done for us at our stadium. Thank you.
Can I get a motion from?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve G3. If the council committee would please vote when it comes up. Thank you. We will now go to G4.
Item G4, consideration of items regarding a 3-year funding commitment to Step Up America for supportive services and permanent supportive housing.
Ms. Newman, if you'll please present this.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair Adams, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the council, Mayor Joines, Marla Newman, Community Development Director. And if you'll give me a second, I'm going to try to locate the PowerPoint for this particular item. Or will you be bringing that up, City Clerk? There was the PowerPoint. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. So this particular item is...
It's not on our screens. Can we get it? Okay.
There we go.
You may speak now. We got it.
This one. This one? Gotcha, thanks. All right. So the proposal before you today is dealing with the acquisition and renovation of a motel or hotel, and those rooms would be converted to individual units for permanent supportive housing. And it's proposed as a public and private partnership. So let me talk a little bit about permanent supportive housing. As you can see, it's a combination of housing and supportive services that are intended as a cost-effective way to help households who have high barriers to living stably and productive lives. Many times, the individuals who require permanent supportive housing have a disability. In addition, a number of individuals who have these disabilities and encounter significant barriers to stable housing often also have been homeless. So what happens with permanent supportive housing, by marrying the provision of housing as well as wraparound services, then those individuals get the necessary supports that enable them to maintain their housing and in some instances not find themselves facing or at risk of being homeless. The services that are include case management, job training, life skills training, educational programs, healthcare services are also provided, and other community support services. They're designed, again, to help individuals live independent lives, help them to access necessary health services, because again, a number of them have various disabilities, and I'll touch on that again in a moment, and actually, again, understand how to live in an apartment by themselves and be able to do those things that they need to be productive. In this particular proposal, it's a collaboration with an organization called American Roundtable and another organization called Step Up America. And again, they're looking to convert a hotel or motel into permanent supportive housing. They have also been in partnership or conversation with Greensboro, High Point, and Asheville. So they are looking at doing projects in all of those communities as well. I think some of you may know that some time ago, Greensboro actually purchased a hotel, and so now I believe they're partnering with these organizations for the upfit and then the supportive services. The city is being requested to provide money just for supportive services. Because this is a public-private partnership, the organizations that I mentioned and their private investors, they're the ones who will purchase the property. They're the ones who will rehab the property with their own money. No investment is asked of the city. They will own and operate the property themselves. So our role would be providing the dollars that would cover the supportive services, the case management, and the like. Based on this particular proposal, if they are able to secure a property with 100 units, the cost of supportive services per individual annually is $7,500. And then that 3-year commitment comes to the figure that you see on the screen of $2,258,234. But I wanted to stress that per door, per individual, the services cost $7,500 a year. So again, the target population, those who are chronically homeless, disabled, with incomes at or below 30% of the area median income. So being able to find housing for individuals with that type of income is a challenge. So part of what happens in this particular model is the entities also partner with the VA for the VA supportive housing vouchers, as well as with the Housing Authority. And so both the VA locally as well as HAWS have been in conversation with Step Up America as well for a commitment of vouchers to be utilized to house the individuals in the converted property. And then, again, I mentioned about the disabilities. These are individuals who have a physical disability, developmental, some kind of sensory impairment, or an intellectual disability. So individuals who need support. So in our local community, on an annual basis, over 800 plus households have a disabled family member served by our COC. And we access the individuals who need these services through street outreach, rapid rehousing. We provide emergency shelter. We do some diversion or support that divert people from homelessness. And we also do prevention assistance. Currently, we have nearly 300 chronically homeless households in Winston-Salem. So with this particular partnership, we have the opportunity to reduce our homeless population by approximately a third. I know this is a dense slide in terms of information, but generally speaking, and I've kind of touched on it a little bit already, Step Up, they're investors, they buy the property, they fix it, they have the vouchers from HAWS and the VA to cover the rent. We provide the funding for the services. They have a 97% retention rate in some of the other communities where they serve. Communities where they function right now include Tennessee, Georgia, many communities in the state of California. In California, they partnered with a state program called Home Key that focuses on providing supportive services and the like for permanent supportive housing. So they have a track record of providing these types of programs in other communities. And I will, in just a moment, also invite, if you please, Mr. Todd Lipka from Step Up America. He is here with us today to provide additional details about the work that they do and also answer some of the questions. Of particular note, I will say, is the fact that they have on-site property managers. So they have support on the property 24/7. So that way, there's no concern about what happens after normal business hours. They are invested in the project to the point of having staff who actually live there. Key components, again, just summarizing: acquire, private capital for acquisition and construction, government resources for rent and supportive services. We're the supportive services piece. And the other beautiful thing about this is by acquiring an existing hotel, what they do is they'll come in, they'll drop in a kitchenette so that within each unit, an individual will be able to do some meal preparation themselves. And with some of the classes and supportive services, one of those that they often provide are how do you create a budget, how do you grocery shop, how do you prepare your own meals. By using existing property and rehabbing it, generally speaking, they're able to deliver these units within a year. So conceivably, within 1 year's time, we could have 100 units of permanent supportive housing to support individuals in our community. We just kind of touched on some of that a moment ago. I'll drill down to the last line again, which is our contribution at $7,500 per unit, per tenant. And they're asking for a 3-year commitment. We are proposing to use Home ARP funds because Home ARP funds are designed to either prevent homelessness or support persons at risk of homelessness or move people from homelessness. 3 years not only covers the period of time during which we have to allocate these funds, but it also provides opportunity for Step Up in partnership with the city to look for other resources to continue funding the supportive services. Sources of funds that can be used for supportive services include COC or Continuum of Care dollars, CDBG dollars, philanthropic dollars. So there are a variety of sources that can be cobbled together to continue the flow. But the 3 years gives us an opportunity to really kind of mine the various opportunities we have here in Winston-Salem, especially from a philanthropic or other standpoint. So that gives us time to get the units occupied, get a track record going, makes it easier for us to seek other funding to keep this going. Another thing I think I should mention also is that with the motels, they have easy access to amenities and public transportation, since many of the residents, of course, won't have their own vehicles. So having them on a transit line or near a transit line makes it a lot easier for them as well to seek the various services that they'll need for their support. If they have to go out for some, many supportive services are brought in-house, but there may be some opportunities like doctor's visits and the like where they may need transportation to get to those appointments. But a lot of those wraparound services are actually provided on site.
Any questions? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, thank you again to say I met with this group, I guess it's been a month or so ago, Marla, and very impressive. I know some of the individuals that used to work in the White House actually that ran the homeless initiative there. We know how to deal with the chronic homeless. We've gotten our numbers down to only about 30 individuals were chronically homeless before the pandemic, and now it's exploded, and now there are just no units out there. We've got vouchers ready to go, but there's just no place for these individuals to go. So I think with Hall signing on and with this organization, we can, as you say, cut it by a third and maybe more going forward. So I think it's a great use of our dollars, and it's a proven concept that works, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Scipio.
Ms. Newman?
Yes, ma'am.
I often get confused why some things come as action items and some come as information items.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I do need you to explain why this is an action item and not just information, and give us a little bit more information about who the American Round Table is, and is Step Up Step Up America nonprofit or a for-profit organization?
Yes, ma'am. Glad to. So first, Step Up America and American Round Table, they partner with private investors, private developers. Those particular entities right now are looking for projects that they want to put on their work plan, if you will, for the coming year. We were selected as one of those potentials, but they are actively looking for projects to invest in, and so looking to make a decision before the end of the year so that they can make their acquisition. So as Mayor Joines mentioned, meeting with the representatives a little over a month ago, they actually looked at some properties while they were in town. Philip Mangano, who was with American Round Table, as well as Mr. Todd Lipka, who is here from Step Up America. So they eyeballed a couple of properties that they're interested in, brought in their actual development partner to look as well. And so now they need to decide which communities they're going to choose, and they are on a fast track to do that. So that's one reason why, or the primary reason really why it came to you as an action item, because time was of the essence for them to make a decision to invest their dollars. As far as the organizations, they are both nonprofit organizations. Let's see, I'll give you a little bit about each of them, and then certainly Mr. Lipka can tell you more about his organization and himself. They are formed to deal with abolishing homelessness. That is their primary and only goal. As Mayor Joines mentioned, Philip Mangano formerly ran the U.S. Council, Interagency Council to End Homelessness in Washington, D.C. He was the homeless point person for the White House under both the Bush and Obama administrations. So he comes to us with a long history of commitment to abolishing homelessness. Mr. Lipka has worked in this field for an extended period of time as well, with the Step Up organization, they have been a member of the Clinton Global Initiative. For their work, they have been personally recognized and endorsed by former President Clinton in 2010 and 2013, as well as having received recognition by the Kobe Bryant and the Kobe and Vanessa Bryant Foundations in California for their work. So they have a track record, they have a good reputation for what they have done. While they, again, have not selected a site yet, they did look at a number of properties when they were here last month. Other questions I might be able to answer, or if you'd like, I'm happy to ask Mr. Lipka to come up as well.
Mr. McIntosh had a question.
Just a quick statement, because I know we're kind of running short on time here, but Councilmember Mundy and I were also at the meeting that the mayor talked about, and it was a very powerful presentation. And it was really powerful to me when it got to the point where they spelled out their business model and that this was only a 3-year commitment, right? So their job, and one that they're prepared to take on because they've done it previously, is finding money to replace our $7,500 per unit per year infusion here. So I look at this as a $22,500 per door commitment, which falls within the range of what we like to do. And that we don't spend any money until a project is awarded. So it's not like we're putting money out there on the comm. So we're waiting for them to bring the project to us. But overall, very, very high level of professionalism. I thought the folks really knew their subject well and presented well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one question, then I'll get a motion. The home art money, and this is to anyone, any staff member, is that a reoccurring income stream, and if so, how much is in the pot now?
Okay, Home ARP is a special allocation from HUD that's a subset of the larger American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay.
That was just designated through Home to address these kinds of issues. So these dollars have to be expended by the end of 2026 as well.
And how much do we have in that?
We have a little over $4 million.
Okay.
$4,887,000.
And I will just make the comment, while they are only asking for a 3-year commitment, for this program to continue, you got to spend $700,000 a year, $750,000 a year, and it would not be the first organization that comes in and asks for an extension if they did. There've been several organizations that I can think of right now that we continue to write checks. Now, it may be well worth doing that, but the point is, we're making an ongoing commitment from a one-time pot of money.
Right.
So we just need to be very careful there that where's it going to come from later?
And that's why I mentioned too, the other sources of funding that are eligible to pay for services are the COC funds, CDBG, those are all eligible expenses. Plus, the one of the things that I'm most excited about is a number of the services could actually be paid for with Medicaid dollars. And they do have experience tapping into Medicaid to pay for some of these supportive services. So that gives time to put the wheels in motion here in the state so that they can become a Medicaid payer or provider, or I'm not sure the proper term, but so that they can tap into those Medicaid dollars as a source of funding to support these services as well.
Yes, Ms. Newman. So now we have $2,629,000 left. The supportive housing that we've been looking at on Northwest Boulevard for the past, 3-4 years now? This money would be allowed to be used for that, am I not right? Because that's, And as you said, this type of money is also in some other categories, whether it's continuum of care and the emergency shelter grant, ESG, and other things that allow that you, like you said, you could kind of collaborate and mix and move. So I'm pretty confident that over the years, HUD will continue. They're finding new programs or new needs that were always there, but they never knew to the extent until COVID. And now they're beginning to fund accordingly for these types of programs. So I feel very confident about the commitment of this organization going forward after 3 years.
Are you gonna make a motion?
I move that we approve
I did have another question.
item G6.
Second.
A motion second, Mr. Mundy.
Thank you, Chair Clark. For clarification, the home ARP, is this different from the 30,000 that we have earmarked? This is a different pot
That's a
altogether?
totally separate pot that came from HUD versus Treasury.
Okay. And I will echo everything that Councilmember McIntosh said. I can't speak strongly enough about this need and supporting it. I think it's a great way to spend our dollars.
Thank you.
Okay.
G4, Chair. I said G6. It's item G4.
G4, we have a motion in a second on G4 for everybody. Committee will vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hang on a minute. Let me get up to, bear with me. We're now on to G5.
Item G5, consideration of items relating to the use of the city's allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds.
Ms. Martin, I'm assuming you're going to present this.
Yes, sir.
Will you please fill everybody in on what's going on?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chair Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Mayor Joines, members of the committee and council. Meredith Martin, Deputy Director of Budget and Performance Management, to give you an update on ARPA Transformational Grants Round 1. So as we like to do, here's just a refresher on the ARPA framework that was endorsed by you all originally when ARPA began. One of the line items, social and economic assistance, we earmarked $10.5 million there, and those are the funds that we're kind of looking at related to the transformational grants process. I also want to note just on this slide, the digital divide initiatives, it still says $5 million right there, but last month we did allocate $2 million for the Winston-Net Partnership Pilot Program. And I also wanted to note that last line on the table, other programming, there's a little less than 2.5 that's still to be determined. So just want to make those notes as we move forward. So an overview for the transformational grants process. As you all know, we received originally 89 applications, totaling $50.7 million in requests, both operating and capital. During our August ARPA meeting, special meeting, where we provided you all with an update of the transformational grants submittal process, we were asked to conduct a survey with you all to prioritize our transformational grants applications, and that whittled the list down to 47 applications that totaled $34.7 million. Today, we're bringing round 1 to you. These 5 organizations received a consensus vote from you all related to that survey. These organizations include the YMCA of Northwest North Carolina for their REACH Center, the Salvation Army of Greater Winston-Salem for their Teen Center, the Boston Thurman Community Network for the Boston Thurman Initiative United, Arts Council for There's No Place Like Home Initiative, and the Old Salem Museum and Gardens Reopen Our Doors, totaling a little over $6.4 million. I do want to note that the Boston Thurman Initiative here, we've started conversations with all these organizations, and in working with Boston Thurman, we've pulled out the part of the request that's dealing with land banking and housing, as that will be related to the housing process with the affordable housing dollars we've already set aside. So to give you an overview of the general scope of work for these 5 applications, the YMCA REACH Center is a renovation project for a facility allowing programming for literacy, career education, health interventions, and youth development. This is a capital request only. The Salvation Army Teen Center is another renovation project, creating a teen center to provide better space for programming related to workforce readiness, health and lifestyle education, financial management, and other initiatives. That's a capital and operating request. The Boston Thurman Initiative is also a capital and operating request, and it's supporting initiatives related to early learning, creating a housing and commercial development feasibility study, the upfit of their administration building and operations building, and college clinic. The Arts Council, there's no place like home. This request came in as an operating request. However, in our early discussions, there will be likely a little bit of a capital request in there within that amount of funding related to art installations. But their scope of work is financial support for the National League of Cities One Nation, One Project initiative, which is geared to improve community health and resilience through the arts. And then finally, the Old Salem Reopen Our Doors is solely an operating request to support the increase in staffing and increase in hours of operations. If you have any specific questions related to those, we have representatives from all 5 agencies here, and they'll also be there Monday night as well, assuming this item moves forward. To give you just an update on kind of some of our ongoing discussions, the North Carolina League of Municipalities and the University of North Carolina School of Government has conducted an ARPA tour over the last month, and our staff went to that and had a few specific questions answered. So we're continuing to work with those organizations as well as the city attorney's office on these two issues regarding eligibility. The first is related to new capital projects for nonprofit organizations. North Carolina gives municipalities the statutory authority to only conduct construction related to arts, museums, and affordable housing. So that's new construction. We do have the authority for renovation, rehabilitation of properties to be used for services provided to low to moderate income individuals or households, and those types of projects would be eligible. So there's a little bit of a distinction there. The other issue that we've kind of been focusing on and continuing to work through is economic development programming. Generally, as we've stated before, economic development projects are not ARPA eligible, but on a case-by-case basis, we can look into workforce development and business support to see about that eligibility. Most of the applications that were submitted, we would need to rescope and work with them to rescope potentially, but we would need to ensure that the services are provided to disproportionately disadvantaged communities within our city. So that's kind of where we stand there with those two issues. So to give you an idea of next steps, upon approval of this item, staff would finalize the scope of work with these 5 agencies, and it would give the city manager authority to execute contracts with them once the scope of work is finalized. We would obviously keep you all up to date on the progress of that. Some of those would be easier to execute, such as the Reach Center, where it's a capital project and it's very straightforward. Some of the other applications, like the Arts Council and Boston Thurman, are a little more broad, so it might take a little longer to get through the scope of work to execute that contract. As far as future batches of grants that might come forward, we will continue discussions with you all and discuss available funding, strategic plan priorities, as well as transformational grant priorities. And as those recommendations came forward, we would obviously bring those for action. We kind of assume that the next batch would come forward either in December or January, just to give you an idea. So I'm happy to answer any questions, take any comments or concerns as we move forward.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Martin, and thank you, Mr. Tesh, as well. Just a question. When you put in here in one of your slides, social and economic assistance, and then at the end you talked about economic development is not ARPA eligible, but on a case-by-case basis. Anybody, I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm just stuck right now. Is it possible that if an entity or organization wanted money for economic purposes, could we not have taken that money out of the Economic Development Fund versus ARPA money, which is supposed to be used for transformational?
We could look at that and have some discussions with
I
the
would,
city.
just like we look at the housing money of CBDG and all of that, and home and ESG and
Yes, ma'am.
everything else, I think we need to look at that because for me, I want us to stay true to what this money was created for transformation. And if we have economic development monies available, then we need to use that money for this particular case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Scipio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question about the Boston Thurman. Once you take their land banking part, what is the amount that is remaining that we're considering for them?
So for them specifically within this slate would be a little over $2.4 million.
That's what it is now. Is that what that's?
Correct. Their
Oh, you've already taken
their
out the
original
other.
request was over $4 million.
Okay, you already took that out. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Mundy.
Thank you for the presentation. I feel like I need to mention something for all of my watchdog folks in the LGBTQ plus community. I know we've had some spotty history in the past with the Salvation Army, and I've met with one of their board members and was very pleased to find out that they've updated all of their non-discrimination policies. So that should not be an issue for any of my folks who are trying to make sure that we follow that non-discrimination policy. And I was very pleased myself to find out that information.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Scipio.
This might be for the council or for Ms. Martin. The applications that did not rise to the top, are they in limbo or what are the next steps for some of those applications?
We're kind of looking to you all for direction there. However, we took the survey that was conducted, I guess, in early September as the first steps to kind of really narrow the list and figure out where we're going as far as our priorities.
As Ms. Martin did mention earlier, she and other folks are going to meet with each council member individually and discuss potential next steps, because we certainly have not spent all the money.
That's correct. Right. This is just the first batch, and we will be bringing forward future.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify for some of the folks who are applicants, the top 5 basically were with grants or that have received at least 5 votes from council and myself. And if I'm seeing there's about 4 million left. There are 3 million that we didn't spend for the digital divide, and there's another 2.4 that we haven't allocated. So it's a potential for another 9 million for the phase 2 or second round of grants coming forward. So still some opportunities there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Burke.
Thank you, Chair Clark, and thank you, Ms. Martin, for that presentation. And I know that this is probably a follow-up question from what Councilmember Scipio asked. We did decide on the 5 organizations for round 1, and I'm just wanting clarification for future rounds. And we did complete a survey, and we did have our top 10. So I'm asking specifically, when we look at future rounds, are we looking at those organizations that came in 6th through 10, or what?
We can definitely follow that. We did that survey to help create a baseline of really where to start as far as looking at consensus overall with our elected body. And so that would likely be a very good place to start those discussions.
And, okay, and thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get a motion from a committee member?
So moved.
We have a motion by Taylor, second by Adams to move this forward. If everyone would please vote when it comes up. Thank you, that is approved. And just to remind everybody, these 5 got general support, as the mayor said. So we're moving those forward. There's at least 2 or 3 other rounds coming. One is the housing round, which we're going to talk about next. It's actually G6. And then we will get with each council member and put together another group of folks that will be, I guess, round 2A or something, come up with some nomenclature. So with that, we will now go.
One more comment, Mr.
Yes, go
Chair. Just for the listening audience again, the council did discuss about, because as Councilmember Burke and Scipio says, and we've tried to communicate, nobody is being kicked to the curb. It's not over until it's over. And again, I have to reiterate, in my discussions with federal organizations, municipalities, more money's coming, grant-type money. But in our monies that we do have, if you notice at the bottom of the slide, it said 2.6 million or something. But I'm asking council to consider again, possibly 1.5 or 1.6 million to assist those agencies who were not yet ready to get into this first round. You have great proposals, but unfortunately, the real is capacity, resources, infrastructure, grant writers, and all this other pieces that you're gonna need so that your next round or whatever, and if, you're prepared, not just for ARPA money now, but for all the other grants that are gonna be coming down the pipeline, you will have a level up that you will have everything in place that you need to have in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you'll please read G6, please.
Item G6, overview of applications for ARPA funding requesting housing and homelessness assistance.
Ms. Newman, you're back up. If you'll please present this.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon again, Chair Clark, Vice Chair, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee, council, and Mayor Joines. Marla Newman, Community Development Director. And right now, we have just a brief overview via the spreadsheet that's attached as Exhibit 1, highlighting the requests that we have received for ARPA funding. And let's see here, make it easier to see it on the screen.
Everybody's screen. Ours has to go up to the satellite and come back down. So there we go. We got it.
Very good. So as you see at the top of the page are two categories. One are ARPA housing requests, and then a second category are the homelessness support request. So that's a listing of everything that has been submitted. Couple of things I want to highlight. You'll see that a number of items are in bold font in the units / persons served. Some of those, not all, in particular the Boston Thurman one, but in the others where you see 40, 15, 800, and 250, those are actually not for physical units of housing. So on the top group, where you see the Golden Lamb Rest Home, that's for some general improvements to their facility, but it's not to rehab any particular rooms of the rest home or add any rooms. In that second part, under homelessness support request, all of that is for services and programs, but no actual physical expansions to shelters or development of new shelters or any type of physical housing, for instance, permanent supportive housing. So those dollars are all strictly service-oriented dollars. And I'll pause there before we look at just other potential housing opportunities in general.
Okay, please continue.
So below, in the second table, you'll find a list of various possible opportunities for housing, some of which we've talked about or taken action on in the past. Others are to be determined. You'll see, of course, choice neighborhoods, future phases in that particular group. And of course, Step Up that you just approved a few moments ago. So these are a number of various opportunities. As you see with Klein Street and Delta Visions, those are two acquisitions that we're currently pursuing for future development. So this just kind of gives you an idea of, at least for some items, what we know or estimate will be the proposed number of units, obviously where they're located throughout the city, and then in some instances what we already know or guess or estimate will be the potential investment on behalf of the city.
Ms. Newman, just a quick comment on your list, and I just looked at it this afternoon. I'm talking about the bottom list. I'll get with you separately. I see several items that I think need to be on there that aren't. But this is one of the two lists that I keep asking for, and that is what's out there now. And I'll look through and get back with you separately on that. But I see one right away is the city currently has 100+ buildable lots, whatever that number is. I know we got 300 pieces of land, but most of them aren't buildable, but things like that. But I'll get with you separately on that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your staff is going to review the ARPA housing request
We have.
as part of, I think we call that round 2, I think.
Yes, and we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Scipio.
Just for clarification, all of this is for the 30 million ARPA money?
The top part is a definite. What you have below were not anything connected to ARPA applications, but could potentially be eligible for ARPA funding.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Chair Clerk.
Yeah, Ms. Mundy.
Thank you. With the other set of funds that we looked at, the staff helped us by tiering the organizations, and there were a few that Mayor Pro Tem referred to that weren't quite ready yet. Have all of these on the top row or the top chart been vetted so that we know that they can indeed meet all the requirements?
They have been vetted. We have not assigned any particular ranking to them as of yet. Was looking for some guidance from both our colleagues at the Budget Office as well as you all for how best to present these to you based on our analysis.
Thank you.
And Ms. Newman, can you show Exhibit 2, which I believe is the next item? That's one. No?
The one that shows the buckets of
Exhibit 2,
money.
funding, there you go. The other question that I have been asking, and this is the answer to it, is what monies do we have available? And I can't read all those numbers, but somewhere in there is the money, Mr. Mundy, you just asked about, I believe, and all sorts of other things involved there. But we have lots of properties we can develop, and we have X amount of money currently that could be used. And over time, the two are going to have to somehow mate up. Mr. Garrity.
Good evening, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Mayor Joines, members of the City Council. Couple clarifications. One on the first exhibit. Just want to make sure no one thinks that there's any. We put down the ward that we think the items are in, but there's not any endorsement by any elected officials yet for any of those. And then as far as the second chart, the one you're looking at now, we are working to bring you a much more detailed report like we've done in the past for capital projects, which shows you description of what that, so for instance, what home ARPA funds, as we talked about before, what it can be used for, what potential things we already know about that are out there. It may not be encumbered, but their council has designated or staff is looking at it. So you can see a lot better description
Yes.
for that, as well as on that first exhibit. We want to flesh out for you a lot more detail for each project because those projects are in all different levels of formulation.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the beginning, not the end of the thing. All right. I think that's all we wanted on G6. There's not a, that's just an information item, Ms. Scipio.
I have one more
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Ms. Newman or either Mr. Garrity, on the exhibit, you just showed us the item 2 with the different buckets of money and programs. At the bottom, you have the budget, $103 million in the current year. Can one of you go ahead and explain so people don't think that we got $103 million and that's not it, that's a budget? And why these other columns are different, the encumbrances and things like that?
So that first column, if you will, is actually current allocations as well as prior years that have not been spent. So that's why that first column for budget is so high, because it's a combination of years together. Actuals are just what have been spent to date. Then the encumbrances means those are commitments that we've made. We may have entered into contracts with entities to actually expend those dollars, which then leaves that final remaining budget are those dollars that have not yet been programmed or committed to any particular development.
And right now, that's 64 million that eventually will be committed to some programming and things that we already do.
That's correct.
That we partner or collaborate with. Is that not correct?
That's correct. For instance, we did Pegram Landing just a moment ago.
Yeah, I just don't want people to think that that's another bucket of 64 million that we can use, because as you see built in here, we got choice, we got all kinds of things that we're responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Newman and Mr. Garrity, there is a question I would like answered, not necessarily tomorrow or the day after, but can the marketplace build single-family housing without subsidy or with minimal subsidy? We have talked a lot about affordable housing. A lot of the lots we have are for single-family detached homes. My hypothesis is, given today's building costs, it would be very difficult to do that. But I would like us to start asking the question, and we got all this land out there. We can pick one if we want to, and see if there is any interest by the private building sector developers in building affordable single-family homes. And if so, can they do it and make a profit? Or do we have to write a check to get it done or whatever? Don't need an answer tonight, but I think that's a very fundamental question, because it will impact a lot of the land that we have and how we develop it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one item left, and Mr. Taylor, I will try to be finished by 6 o'clock. If the city clerk will please read G7.
Item G7, information regarding recommendations for eligibility of financial assistance in designated revitalizing commercial areas.
And can you bring the map up while he's talking, so everybody know what we're talking about? Mr. Millett, you've been up on overtime now. Will you kick this off for us? And this is information only tonight.
It is. Thank you, Chairman Clark. Good evening again, everyone. And Councilmember Scipio, this is an information item, as the chairman noted, primarily because of something that I will talk about at the very end, seeking additional input from council members. All of you, I believe, are familiar with the Revitalizing Urban Commercial Areas program that was created in the mid-2000s by City Council to address blighted areas, commercial areas of the city that have been disinvested in, perhaps not invested in at all. So the need to reverse that trend had been noted by council, which did lead to the creation of that Revitalizing Urban Commercial Areas program. There have been 4 cycles of funding since 2006. Most recently, in 2018, voters approved GO bonds that allocated $2 million specifically for this program that was going by a different name at the time, called Commercial Revitalization of Blighted Areas, or CRBA, but the program did operate identically as RUCA. So council did note that since the time of the initial evaluation of the properties for eligibility, a good deal of time had passed. Perhaps there are properties that were eligible and needed investment at the time that may not need it now, or there may be areas that did not need it then. The opposite of what I just said. They may have needed it then and not now, or not now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I confused myself there. So as part of that, Kirk Erickson and Amy Crum in Planning Development Services with their staffs have conducted an updated analysis of the areas for participation in the program. And I'll invite Ms. Crum up to walk you through that report and the recommendations.
Ms. Crum? Mr. Erickson, are you coming?
Good evening, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Mayor Joins, members of council, Amy Crum, Assistant Planning Director. So we had staff last spring go out and look at activity centers. These activity centers are focused areas for activity, be mixed-use activity, whether it's commercial, institutional, or housing, and they're identified in our area plans. And so one critical detail that we did different this time than we did previously for the initial round was initially we looked at a growth management areas 1 and 2. So that's where that urban name comes from. This time around, we actually expanded out into growth management areas 1, 2, and 3. So essentially the entire city. So you're picking up some of these suburban areas. So that's hence the name change, essentially. We removed the urban from it because it doesn't hold anymore. And so we looked at each of these activity centers based off of site conditions, things like presence of public transportation options, sidewalks, the presence of signage and the state of the signage, the state of the asphalt parking lot, landscaping presence, things of that nature, as well as the actual buildings themselves, facades, condition, roof condition as best as we could tell, things of that nature. We also looked at crime in the area to see, what crime levels we had, as well as looking at investment in the area, whether it be public dollars or private investment that has taken place in the last 5 or so years. And so with that, altogether, we ranked each of these activity centers on a tier base. So tier 1 were poor condition, tier 2 were fair condition, tier 3 were average condition, tier 4 were above average, and tier 5 were excellent condition. And then we recommended that those activity centers that were in tier 1, 2, and 3 be considered eligible for this program. And you can see them there on the map. The yellow identified areas are the eligible areas. The blue is the not recommended for eligibility. And the reason why we kept those average rated tier 3 activity centers is we wanted to kind of get to them before they really got into a blighted state. If maybe with a small influx of funds, we could either keep them average or move them up instead of having them fall off and become blighted, if we could kind of stop that before it really starts. That's essentially the process we went by. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about how we got to this map, essentially.
I would say if any councilman, Ms. Larson.
It's a lot of work, obviously, and a lot of field work. The map that we have is very general in appearance, and I'm assuming that each council member can bore down and actually see what houses, buildings are within those individual property lines, because I think there's some question about what's inside the yellow and what's actually on the edge of the yellow that maybe needs to be included.
Yeah, so each council member should have received a map specifically of their ward, and then within the final report, there is a map of each individual activity center that's rated 1, 2, or 3. The actual assessments for every single activity center is in that report, just not the maps for those that are rated 4 or 5. And we went based off of the area plan recommendation boundaries. Those were adopted plans. That's why we chose the boundaries that we chose.
Okay, Mr. McIntosh.
Just very quickly, thank you for a very thorough report. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I geek out over, and it was just really well done, and I appreciate it. And by the way, congratulations on the new position, new title.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I will say, as just pointed out, all the council members got individual maps, and I would say if you've got issue on what road it stops or starts, I would get up with these folks, because long-term, those in the yellow will be eligible for some funds when and if we come up with some money.
Thank you. Chairman Clark, one final thing.
Oh, had a question.
My final question is actually, what's the next steps on this? Now that we've seen your output, what's the next step?
So that's a great lead-in as to why this was an information item. During our conversations with council members in preparation for this, several had questions and comments about some areas that may not have been included in the assessment of the areas or an area for recommendation. As Ms. Crum noted, what were evaluated for this report were all designated as activity centers. Some of the areas that were noted by council members, the reason for exclusion was because they were not cited as an activity center in the area plans. So what we would like to do is after this presentation at Finance Committee, before we come back as an action item, we'd like to reach out to all of the council members to see if they would like an opportunity to make some suggestions of areas to be assessed, undergo the same evaluation, the same assessment the activity centers did, and based on those findings, bring the recommendations back as an action item to designate the activity centers as eligible and perhaps areas that may not be an activity center but have been noted as a priority by council.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I believe that's the last item. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, Mr. Taylor, when would you like to begin your meeting?
Mr. Clark, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Public safety will begin at approximately 6:11 or so.
6:11. Thank y'all very much for coming. We are adjourned.